Yes. There we go. The audio is muted. Okay. Hello, everyone. You should be able to hear us now. Sorry. Uh, one man act on the production side of this thing. I apologize. So
Good. So they didn't have to. We didn't subject them to our chatter at
they
the
heard
beginning. But
no. They missed some amazing philosophy just a second ago from Bao,
this is
and
true. This is true.
that's just too bad. You'll have to just go without it. Well, Bao, last time we talked, you were promoting Paper Tigers. We had just met at Comic Con and seen each other at Comic Con. Um, how's everything going after the release? What's the response been? And do you have any updates?
Wow. The response has been great. It's been going. I think we had a. Let me think. Let me recall. This was actually a Comic Con a year ago, right? So Comic Con a year ago, we had a release in Japan, and then we had a couple releases in I think Australia and South Africa. So the film's still getting out there, doing some work, and we're just pleased as punch to have it out there. It's just been wild because it just kind of comes out in stages and waves. Every time you have a country that's released, we just kind of do a mini promotion for that region. But then it's a way for people to talk it up as well. We're still on Prime. We're still on iTunes. We're on Tubi now. So any opportunities, I think there's a Spanish dub version on Tubi. So I think
Ooh,
there's all the
we gotta see that.
we'll
Those are
see
my
the movie.
favorite.
See,
Those are my favorite. I hope you did your own voice.
they didn't call me,
Oh, why
unfortunately.
not?
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a Spanish dub of Death Grip, and it's way more dramatic.
Nice. There's the one, the German one, we were really impressed by. Like they actually matched like the tone and timbre of especially Ron's voice. Ron, who plays Hing, also does a lot of VO work. So his voice is actually super distinctive. And so they actually found someone had that kind of like gravelly, low growl timbre that Ron has in German, if you
Whoa,
can imagine
whoa, that's pretty cool.
that. Yeah.
And do you so when you do these more local promotions, what does that look like? And
It could run the gamut. Some of them are just streaming, some of them are on theatrical. So that just depends on what the distributor that we're working with for that region, would like to do. We're kind of at their service in a way to promote the film, but also it's up to them to package and advertise and design. Even you can have like really wildly different designs of the poster from region to region. So that's the another kind of like weird new journey of distribution as well.
do you have any interesting stories of surprises? Maybe like good surprises, bad surprises?
I'm trying to think here. I think there's some alt versions that we had done. I think Michael Velasquez, one of our producers, had done some design alts just because he had a lot of free time after finishing the film, so he wanted to, you know, come up with some more kind of fan style created art. And it's interesting that you had a different style and take because he did like these VHS retro posters. That doesn't mean like it's good for selling a release, but it's almost like this kind of like that Mondo type of posters where
Yeah.
it's in the zeitgeist, people are aware of it, then you can kind of riff on it with a design that's a little bit more abstract or a little bit more different. So it's like interesting to think about poster marketing, posters as marketing, but posters as design pieces, as all those things. So it's just kind of like filling all that for, because now we have fans that are pretty rabid, and also you have new people who haven't seen the film at all. So you have to kind of like figure out what makes sense for all these different types of audiences.
What advice would you give to people to make that process as uh, painless as possible? Because I've gone through this, and the key art process can be very time consuming. So, what have you gone through, and what have you learned regarding that whole thing?
Oh wow. It's almost like I think it's even broader than that. If you want to have creative control, you got to be part of it and driving it all the way to the very end, and even just pushing and doing a lot of stuff and work above and beyond, if that makes sense. Because if you just say to a vendor or your distributor or something, for example, you want this idea and you kind of let them run with it, then they could go any which way or a lot of surprising ways. So you actually have to kind of like take the reins and take it and do the work of the designing, or just kind of for lack of a better word, handhold them in a little way and be able to get to design to the point to where you want it to be. And the same as directing, you just have to be able to, you can't just kind of let them off to their own devices if you really want to have a firm hand on the design. So it's kind of that's the cost of doing business, right? So if you want to be able to have creative control, you have to put in the work for it.
And is that easy to maintain, that kind of control? And how much work is that? I mean, do you have to do that with every
Depends.
distributor?
No, it depends. Like you have a master template. With a distributor, you basically determine a master template and design. Everyone just kind of localizes and then changes the colors and layers and stuff like that. Because you give them, basically a delivery file, like a PSD file with all these layers that they can choose and take out or use. So you just give them options from that. But I think in general, it's just like being able to have something that's appealing and again making sense from a marketing point of view for their purposes, because sometimes you might have a star or a premise or that's not known in another country. So now you're kind of working. What are you working with to promote the film at that point? So it's just kind of a dance to work with a distributor, but ultimately it's up to them. So if you make the deal with them, that's the determination is up to them.
Have you gotten any specific, what would I say? Have you gotten any feedback that's almost region specific, right? Like Germany liked this, but Portugal liked this. Have you noticed any differences regionally?
Yeah, I think German audiences are really big on action, and they've been big fans and big history of like just loving action movies. Um, Almost to how would you say? Almost like it's a genre, right? It's definitely considered a category of a genre. This is I don't want to say niche, but it's understood that this isn't a certain type of audience that they're appealing for. And the Japan market, Japan, obviously has a long history of martial arts and martial arts cinema and Japanese action cinema. So you have to kind of market it a little differently. And what I saw them do was kind of like a little bit more nostalgic, a little bit more kind of like the comedy, playing up the comedy and the I guess you could say the humorous elements versus the martial arts themselves. So that's kind of like it's interesting to kind of sit back and watch. Again, we're just watching and observing, but that's kind of the marketing choices that they decide to make, because if you go into a niche market or a genre market, you can kind of stand out. But if you're releasing a martial arts film in a country that's like really big on martial arts or very familiar with martial arts, you have to find another uh, differential.
Have you have you been able to sell to China?
Oh, that's been funny. I don't know, it's been a tough nut to crack. I think even we've been trying on different avenues, but this we released the movie during COVID. So I think that was some sensitivity, not over politics or anything, but just over like theaters not being open or just like and it just became a streaming market. Um, I don't want to say overnight, but it became like a lot more in terms of like distributing US films. There's a quota and all that stuff. So it just became a challenge around that. Um, but there's also piracy because people like our friends, would text us from China saying they congratulations on the film, and we're like, how did you see this film?
It's
So it's
funny.
like, yeah, so you have that kind of element too. So it's the longer it's out there, it's like it's harder to kind of like pick up an official distribution.
Yeah.
It would be a great audience to build on.
Yeah, I mean they're as hungry for action as anybody. Um, and I think the movie would do great there. Um,
I mean, that's an interesting question because, like, again, it goes back to what we were talking about Japan or China. It's like what these markets are so you could say saturated with martial arts films and martial arts stuff, and also stuff that they make on their own. I mean, it's like imagine if we're coming in and we're trying to sell hamburgers to America, like a Japanese version of hamburgers. Like, well, we have hamburgers here, right? So it's like it's a weird pitch to get an Asian audience that's really well versed in the Asian action cinema on a film like this. So you have to kind of use the comedy. You have to use the other elements that again are kind of different about it.
have you gotten any pointers from sales agents and distributors on what what do they recommend to make, because you're making kind of an Asian American film and trying to sell it to an Asian audience, like Chinese Asian audience.
Yeah.
Have you gotten any pointers on what to look out for, what to be careful about, what to promote. Like you said, that you know push the comedy. What else have you learned?
Uh, I think in terms of the international market, the advice was given is like international buyers are basically see your movie as a piece of meat. So it's like, let's get the romance out of the side aside here, and it's like figure out what exactly, like you say, can help them make money off of it. And that's the kind of things you have to kind of like, and whether the movie in and of itself can do that, or where you have to get creative on the marketing to be able to pull those levers, then that's one thing to do. But I think it's just each country is just going to have their own like tastes, and it's just like pitching a movie for investors. Everybody's going to have their own like appetites and tastes about what they think a movie could work. And even if it's a good movie, doesn't mean they know what to do with it to market and distribute it. So that's kind of the thing that you have to kind of have thick skin about. So even if you are proud of your film and you think it's a great film, and it's doing really, an audience really takes to it, if the distributor doesn't have a clue about how to package and handle it, then that's not a good partner, right? So that's just kind of like business.
Yeah, that's a very touchy subject on, I mean, we've seen films like Force Unleashed get released in
Yeah,
America and all the cast is on the cover, and then it gets released
yeah.
in other parts of the world. And it's like, why are some cast members missing from the cover, right? Like there seems to be some bias here. So,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
it's like Fast and Furious, right? They have different versions of character posters and kind of like even the layout and prominence
yeah,
of the talent, and it just depends on region to region.
yeah. Well, I hope that I hope you get China. Um,
Me
and
too. Sure, that'd be great.
have you guys seen any? I mean, production value is great, but maybe I'm biased because I like lower budget stuff and I appreciate kind of like the grit more than like the super polished sheen of Fast X, for example.
Yeah.
Um, do you find that to be a barrier to entry to some of these markets, being an indie?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a challenge. I think when we already set out to make the film, we wanted to give it a polish, and whatever a polish can mean in different people's minds, we wanted to just give it a production value, give it like make it look like it wasn't held together by a shoestring, which it was, but you want to give it a look. You want to shoot on a camera that's going to give you a cinematic look. You're going to invest in lights that's going to, be able to set the proper mood and all those things, and just have all those things have to come together again on a shoestring budget. But it's important that we were wanted to give the script that type of justice. Again, some scripts may not need that much polish. Like if you're doing a mumblecore like
Right.
rom-com or something, like it's just meant to be lo-fi. It's like you embrace that kind of like really home video gritty look, and it's fine. But if for a story that we want to do here, first and foremost, it would serve the script the most. And then second, yes, it does
Yeah.
elevate your project in front of buyers' eyes because it looks like a movie. And so that's kind of like that's what makes this the most expensive hobby in the world, is that you have to spend some money to be able to make it look good and be able to kind of like give it that shine. Because yeah, buyers will, it's one of those things. It's not saying they won't buy a really lo-fi look of a movie. It's just that there's just going to be more resistance that you're going to have to overcome for them to be convinced about taking it on. So it's just really kind of like what makes the most sense as far as from that business point.
I'm amazed sometimes when you can come across a film that's Hardcore Henry is not a low budget film, but
No,
it's made with GoPros, and
yeah,
that movie still looks like a well, I think it was a $6 million movie, but he started on an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter, and then got the rest of the money. I think the total budget was 6 million,
yeah,
but it looks like it's got this sheen to it. And in your film, pulled off like very good. Like, you also select locations that are gonna look good. There's probably a lot of that goes into production design as well, art direction. It's not just your camera; it's also your locations, right? Like what's that process? What's that process for you? What does that look like?
uh it's a whole teamwork between your cinematographer, your production designer, and just trying to figure out what kind of makes the most sense of the look for the story. I think we kind of, we don't want to overthink and think about, oh, how's this going to sell in such and such country. It's like, is it going to work for the story? And also logistically, that's always a conversation about what it takes to shoot there and all that stuff. That's all conversation that kind of goes into the strategy of picking a location.
Mm.
Yeah, you might have a really great location, but it could be a pain in the butt to rig lights or bring the crew or do all the things, and then now you're getting a sliver of a look versus more options to shoot a location that might not be as picturesque. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
it's like you might have a less picturesque location, but it gives you a lot more angles to shoot from, a lot more logistic things that you could do, get your coverage that you want, especially if it's a fight scene. You're able to move the camera in a way that is a lot more flexible. All the things, and so it's like I know, especially for fight scenes, we'll walk through. Back in the day when we were doing our shorts, like you'll walk through and find a really cool meat locker, and you're like, "This is awesome!" Just all these really tight spaces.
Yeah.
But then you realize it's really hard to shoot in. It's really hard. It's
Mm.
a challenging thing to do. So those are kind of like the give and takes that you have to kind of make. And it's no right or wrong. At the end of the day, is the audience loves it. That's the ultimate litmus test, right? But again, it's just also for a feature film, it's a marathon, right? You're trying to pick this battle to win this battle so that you don't have to deal with it, another day, so it doesn't come back and pester you, right? All these problems don't you need to solve problems as they come up versus push them down the hill.
When you're looking at a location, and I have a really hard time with this, and maybe a lot of us do, because I think so much in terms of movement. I'm not really, maybe I'm not seeing what other people are seeing, but when I see a location, I see a lot of opportunities for movement and whatnot, and then we shoot it, and the DP will have an issue with how it looks. He's having a hard time lighting it. He's having a hard time sort of making it look the way that he needs it to look. What do you see when you look at a location, and how do you know that that location is going to look good?
I am personally always giddy inside when I see something lit up. It's like the makeover kind of effect. You just like it's just not the person you thought you saw. Like this is a whole new person. It's an amazing thing, and what a cinematographer and a production designer brings to the game, because they're looking for things that I can't imagine how you even rig light. But I think it's about having a conversation and saying, what exactly do I need as a director from the scene? What do I need to see? What do I need to have as a feeling? What do I need to, what the characters need to be able to go through? And then you let them interpret. So I think for me, it's the teamwork that really comes into it. Like I'm not a person that I can visualize. Yes, I know exactly, what we're trying to go for, but it's like that whole look fully baked in my head. That's not the way it works. It's like it becomes a process because you give it over to your DP, you give it over to your production designer to do some magic on it, and then they have a conversation. They talk about have ideas about what they want to do, and then could you build a silk, could you build a screen or something over this window? Yes, they'll put some, and it's all that in play as well. And then, so but ultimately everyone's going towards a game plan that I had set forth. So once you let them run and go with it, that's where the magic is. But back to your thing, it's like I think it's about just understanding, like that makeover. Like it's not going to look like this on the day. Obviously, this is going to move. All this stuff is going to get out of the way, and then but it's also trying to figure out almost the geometry of something of a room, and just the way the walls sit, and maybe there's just the bones of it, if that makes sense. And that's the starting point, because everything else can be shoved and moved around and stuff like that. So
You look at movies like the John Wick series. There's a there's a lot of there seems to be a lot of intention with the locations.
yeah,
And they're like when you're directing action, uh, not only are you seeing how the action plays out in there, but you're almost kind of like creating a character with the room, I guess. Um, so I guess it's just the way that you approach it is you go to your DP, you guys have a conversation about it, and you go from there. That's yeah. I
what's
guess
this trifecta? All of us are kind of team working around this, because especially if the location is a character, and it does give the actors something to react off of, because they see something, they clock something, they kind of might look towards it doing a line or whatever. It's like, oh, it's all that play, and even just down to the magic that a good camera op brings to the table. Just that intuition to move and shift the camera just slightly to the left or the right, just to kind of track an actor's move or something like that. Those are little like things that, again, I can't micromanage that, but you have to kind of be able to trust and then have a good team that can follow the game plan as a whole.
Yeah, being able to react to the environment is something I see it as a luxury now because being in motion capture, you never have a
Mm,
location anymore.
yeah.
Unless you, I mean, the best you get is you see the live feed on the monitor and you see a very rough kind of gray box version of the location, then you can kind of figure out where you're at. So much different than just like shooting on the street where you know
Yeah.
exactly where you are. You can look at something, point to it, talk about it, touch it, walk around it. All that has to be created from scratch in mocap. But I guess that's also the same with a lot of previs processes now, where previs is almost like mocap, where the team has this a script page, for example, and they go and they pre-visit in a gym and kind of try and imagine the location, and they build a scene around that, and then they go and they plant it in the movie. Um, was that your process for making action, or did you guys just go to the location and feel it and do it there? How do you like to approach the design process?
It's an interesting because previs in my mind really just came in the last, I'm aging myself, but maybe like the last 10 years to be a thing. Like, so when we were doing our indie stuff, I don't know how are you doing, contour and all that stuff. We were on set trying to figure it out. And then like then you realize how unsustainable that is. And you're like, yeah, we're getting kicked out of this location like in 8 hours. So we better do this. Like then you realize that previs made a lot of sense. So I think we were going to get to a point where it made sense that to previs or even just boarding is like the OG previs, if you will. And like we were doing a lot of kind of those type of conversations and planning and mapping as much as we could. But the whole idea of like actually giving over to the action team to doing previs, that was actually a first for Paper Tigers. For the Challenger, we just figured out the map. I saw the choreography and we just filled out a shot list based on that and we shot it. There wasn't much there was no previs around that. There was like rehearsal footage and just kind of like dinking around, but it wasn't actually like a full-on previs. So the Paper Tigers was actually the opportunity for them, the action team, Ken Kidwa and Sam Loke and Kerry Wong to actually like do it because at that point it's like there was so much stuff going on making a movie. It's like you have to start it makes sense. It all makes sense. Like I'm not I just it's a new thing, but it makes sense that this is part of the workflow now. And it's just they had to go off and do out and work with the actors and work out those scenes while I'm putting out other fires. Like it's just like that's the whole process. And also it affords you to have a that new fresh eyes to something because you're seeing the whole kind of like thing put together at the end and the previs, and then you're reacting to that as a director and you're able to give notes and we can iterate and we can that way you're not too in the weeds on like every design and every variation and edit, and then you can kind of give feedback on that. So I think it works out if you have a team that all on the same page.
Yeah, makes total sense. Is there
But it's
anything?
interesting talking about mocap. I was just the other month I was doing I did a tech day at a virtual production studio, which is like basically all the Unreal Engine, like the stuff that Cameron was doing on Avatar. And it's crazy. It's like weird. My brain had to shift because I'm so used to doing it a certain way. And like the whole workflow and like you say, you go to a location, you see stuff moving, cars are moving, like street lights, like it's live, it's the world. But this one is like everything has to be all set and baked in a way that you have to think about it now when normally you wouldn't have to. So it's like it's a weird. It was. I mean, it's a very interesting and promising technology. But for me, I would have to say I was just trying to like my mind was like discombobulated by the end of the day. But it was a very interesting technology to actually have to kind of like wrap your head around.
Did you find it restricting?
Um, restricting. I feel granted there was only a day, but I would say I have this fear is like, did I leave anything on the table? Do you know what I mean? Because I think we're in a practical location, I can improvise or we can capture these moments, we can flow with what's given to us. And it just feels like I feel like I'm really quick with that. We can adjust, we can like cheat this angle here. Like it's just I just feel like I have my bag of tricks. Do you know what I'm saying? And then like here we're in this virtual set. It's like, yeah, we're getting the pieces. If you look at the shot list, we've gotten the master wide, blah blah blah, and we have it. But I just feel like, am I missing? So like I just feel a little paranoid. Like, what am I missing? The spontaneity. I feel like I don't know where that is and where I can catch that lightning in a bottle. Whereas, you go out into the real world and you shoot, like I can be very sensitive and aware of when good things are happening. We should be rolling, right? So it's like that kind of like, I don't know what it is. Is it like surfing on an ocean versus surfing on the those little surf machines? Like it's a different feeling, right?
Yeah. We're, I mean, we're experiencing that right now. We're doing a feature using motion capture, and
Mm,
on paper, in my head, it looks like this, and then we do a video previs, kind of exploiting a new idea. Like doing a motion capture idea that you would, on an indie level, you'd never be able to do, like
right.
a like a like a spider creature that can grab, and which is like really cheap using virtual production. And then when we actually do it with previs, it looks like this. And then when we actually go to to motion capture, then it feels like this. And then it's in engine, and it just looks like nothing at all looks like what I thought it was. And
Yeah.
we end up having to go back and back again and back again. We kind of like hone the edge. We just keep on doing this until it's like, okay, here's the vision. Okay, here's the tech that we have. Here's the vision. Here's the tech and the art. And here's the vision. And then it's such a refining process that, yeah, I'm not used to it. It's a different kind of pressure, I guess,
Yeah.
because there's a different, there's a pressure when you're on, you're fighting the sun.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we were like moving the sun over. We were playing with sunsets and sunrises. It's just like it's just a
Yeah,
whole different like playground. Yes, it's like a video game.
yeah,
But I think the other thing is I don't know if maybe this is me being a dinosaur, but having seen all these movies and being inundated with the cinema of reality, there's a certain film I don't want to say language, but there's a certain film intuition that you're used to and you kind of go with because it's just the limitations of thing. And then my example being is that you can in a virtual world, you can move the camera in between the source and the light or the subject and the light and not have a shadow cast over it, right? Stuff like that, where in a real world you would either kind of like shift the lighting or you move under, you move over, like, but in a video game, Unreal, you just pass through and then like it is what it is, right? So it's just in your brain, you're like, that shouldn't be a real shot, but it is a shot.
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah. I don't know what. I mean, you lose something. You definitely lose something. Um,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to be a Luddite about it, but I mean, it's just like
well,
you're not used to seeing those shots because that has never existed in 100 years of cinema, right?
yeah,
It physically is impossible to do.
yeah,
You
yeah.
have all
So
these impossible shots now.
yeah, you have impossible shots. I mean, maybe this is why, like, you look at cinematics from like with the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 era, right? Or like CG movies from the 90s where they
Yeah,
realized we could do camera angles that look like this, and nobody's ever seen that before, and it almost doesn't land, you know,
yeah,
because it's hard to process. And so similarly, it's like, well, when you put the camera, you put the light here and the subject is here, and you decide you don't want to cast a shadow over here because it's
yeah,
messing up this asset or whatever it might be.
yeah,
Like, okay, yeah, that allows you to show the asset, but now you don't have a shadow, and now people are looking at this and they're like, something's not clicking, right?
yeah.
So
Because even
maybe, yeah,
handheld is a construct. We just seem to go with it. But if you think about it, the camera or the view is suddenly shaking and moving, and like blood is splattering on the lens. That's a construct that we've kind of embraced and used now.
yeah,
But that so it's like,
yeah,
and this all those. I think it's going back to if we're having a pattern here. It's like the imperfections of these things. It makes it feel human. It makes it feel real, and those are things that we subconsciously
yeah,
register as you know as real, or as not real, but as a it's touchable, it's tactile,
yeah,
and so you feel like you're really experiencing a film versus kind of like seeing a commercial display or something like
mm,
that.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
don't know. This is all fuddy duddy stuff because you see on TikTok and these kids who do these warping videos. It's incredible. Like those are the new tech, and that's a new language that they're used to and completely using.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because you have this great idea for like the motion capture animation film, and then um, the as you try and get it to look more like movies, you try and introduce grit and dirt and the human element to it. That gets incredibly expensive very
Yeah,
quickly. Like you're making Avatar at that point.
yeah,
People don't realize this, that if you want to do a CG film, and you decide that you want to do like a drama with close-ups and people crying, or like if you want to throw an egg on a, I'll give an example. I mean, I was writing a short film where it was a CG short film where this guy's got robots, and one of the robots chases him, and they end up on a flying bus, and there's a whole city, and it's all futuristic. None of this was an issue. None of this would cost anything. But then I wrote a gag where when he's on top of this bus, it's kind of this like, inner city bus that flies, right? It's got like a bunch of smoke coming out the back, right? But there's a chicken on top, and the chicken lays an egg, and the egg falls on the guy's face. And the animator said, "Hold up, hold up, hold up. That egg is gonna cost us like $3,000 because of the particle effects needed to simulate a yolk and an egg cracking and all this." And I was just like, this is the most backwards way of thinking that I've ever experienced. Because that's the cheapest part for indie filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's why for a lot of films that maybe don't hit the mark, or animated films, it just feels like it's all plastic.
Yeah.
And it never feels like you never have those sparks of reality.
Yeah.
I'm not saying reality, realistic look, but just to feel like, oh, that happens. Like that's something I can recognize and stuff like an egg splattering on something. And that's a real thing.
Yeah. You just cut the gag.
Cut the gag. That's it.
Which is fine. If you can do that, then you can make your cheap animated film.
Well, it flattens everything, right? So it's like, it's all like, if you think about, I think there was a book by Chuck Jones, but just like cartooning, the idea of caricature and cartooning, it's not doing something realistic. It's like exaggerating some feature, a guy's nose or a woman's chin. It's all like exaggerating and making that the personification of a character.
Yeah.
And so if you flatten all that, then you have something that's just really, uncanny valley.
Yeah, you can't really do a Takeshi Kitano anime. I don't think that would work.
Maybe he could do it.
Well, he could probably. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's why he never has.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Has there been kind of like, I don't know, an art house animation, kind of that type of slow paced? I'm sure they exist. I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah, probably. Huh. Yeah, we're trying to crack the animation nut with action, and obviously that's been cracked with video games.
I love it.
Is there any animation that's caught your eye action wise? Because I'm always interested in seeing like what works with animation action wise. And of course anime, they've kind of like nailed it, but like anime is it's its own thing, right?
Wait, so what's the difference? Just so I'm understanding.
I mean, like 3D animation versus 2D animation.
Oh, 2D. Yeah. I mean, obviously the anime action is like a whole nother level type of action. There was that series Love, Death, and Robots. Yeah. Have you been watching that on Netflix? So they have all these different animation styles, 2D, 3D. And then there was a couple of the ones I think it was David Fincher's one that had kind of this action scene with this monster in the ship and stuff like that. And it was moving the camera in a way that was like, it was 3D animated, but it was moving the camera obviously in a way that was like super dynamic. I thought that was like, okay, that was like getting to something, because you do all this warping, but it's not warping anymore. You're just moving the camera. You can move the virtual camera and set it however you want it. So it's an interesting, just going to be a new vocabulary.
Yeah.
I don't know. Has it been done well? If I were to just spitball, like you would have to, I guess, what's the point of doing it so photorealistic? You'd have to do stuff where you have that plasticity and the elasticity of the characters that you get with animation, and just maybe salt and pepper it throughout. It doesn't have to be at the whole fight, but you want to have those elements. So otherwise, like, you'd be looking at this weird facsimile of an action scene. Yeah, maybe the techniques will all be cleaner, and I don't know, because I feel like it's all part of that.
Do you remember? And this guy's still around. I think it was called Xiao Xiao. It was a stick figure.
Oh yeah,
those are like viral videos before YouTube.
Oh yeah,
and it's like a perfect example of just like, okay, well, this is the tech I have. I have stick figures.
Yeah,
and I'm just gonna go all in. Yeah, and no shaky cam, no realism, nothing. And that's always the stuff where I'm looking at, how did somebody make an interesting action design with nothing?
Yeah.
versus the hyper realism that you're talking about.
Oh, then you're pushing all the way to the abstract. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you see some really funny. I keep bringing up TikTok, but there's really funny TikTok videos that people are just putting together like little action stuff. Just not even action people per se, but they're just putting in these like stuff that they've seen through anime and they just kind of replicate it. The thing is, it's like it's a whole new world, Eric.
So
What do we?
yeah, and I always ask this question now with people. It's a two-part question. Where are the mainstream action comedians, and why are they all on YouTube and TikTok, and why
Hmm,
aren't they doing feature films?
it's a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's just that general question of like, okay, because we talk about like action comedy is kind of dying, and it's like, yeah, but then when you go on YouTube and
Oh yeah,
these guys are doing gun tests in their backyard, and it's funny and it's dangerous. It's like this different kind of genre of action comedy, very physical too. But it's not a feature film. It's not going to be in the cinema.
yeah. I think it's them creating their own work, and it's just like you or I don't know the team names, but there was that team that did these kind of the superhero spoof action. They're like an Australian team out of Aus- and they just made our feature, and I think it premiered at Sundance, either the last Sundance or the year before. So they're gonna have, I think A24 is distributing it, I think next year. But that's an example of like that's the only way the pipeline will work. There's no way. I don't want to say no way, but the industry is not like the studios don't just come in and like sweetheart a deal a YouTube star and give them a feature film. Like it doesn't work that way. It just kind of they have to kind of create their own movie and then create their stamp and then studios pay attention and then giving them bigger bucks. But it doesn't jump from like YouTube straight to feature films for a lot of reasons. But it's just like that's we're seeing more of that, and I think we're gonna have a lot more in the next few years. Well, I don't know. Movies could be dead in 5 years, Eric. I don't really know, but
Mm.
but they're gonna have opportunities that are just gonna be a lot more accessible for distribution, for being seen, and I guess platforming the stuff that they're already doing on YouTube.
Yeah, when do you think studios start paying attention to these things?
Probably when it's too late. It's just one of those things. Like I think
Yeah.
the studios are so big right now, and obviously you can see all the problems with the strike. It's like addressing all these systemic issues with how these studios are built and how these models are made. Like it's not meant to be agile. It's not meant to find the youngest, brightest talent, that people are already watching. I mean, if you look at the numbers and hours spent on social media versus actually watching even the streamers, it's like night and day. So I think that's kind of like where it's one of those things. It's like it's just gonna come up on then it'll be too late if they're not reacting quick enough. So that's the state of the business right now. Whether us as creators, how that kind of like sits in within all that. I mean, we can only just do the things we can do and control, right? We have stuff, we have ideas, we create it, we get it out there. That's all, as independent filmmakers are able to do, and we do that really well. So I think that's what I think bodes well for the future in terms of that indie spirit, whether it's whatever platform, whether type of distribution it is. That's what's going to push us through, not for a studio to write a big check for us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, Everybody's eye is on that ball. At least we talked about this in your interview too about your being in Seattle and a little bit distant from the the vortex and and even here in Vegas, like you know, the general kind of talk about cinema is far enough from Hollywood so that when you come up with an idea, the first idea out of your mouth is not, well, let's take it to Netflix, Amazon, and see what money they can give us. That's not the first idea out of your mouth. The first idea is, how do we do this? What location could we get? What's the idea in general, right? Um, do you think that, like, is that a discipline that people need to adopt when doing new media? Is to say, no, stop looking at the castle over there. Don't look at the castle. Look at your audience and start making stuff for them. And don't worry about that thing. Like if they want you in there, they'll bring you in. But make it for your audience first. Like what kind of mindset do people need to make it in this new media platform? Because you did it. You made your film, right? So what mindset would you recommend people have?
Well, I think it ties into what we were talking about poster design, just something as that it's the attitude that you kind of bring to the work. It's like, are you waiting to have someone sign you a big check to do something great? Or are you just going to do it? Like, in my mind, there's not much math to be made. You don't have to, that's a choice that you might do subconsciously, but that actually determines a lot of how you go about and do your work. And I see it a lot. I see folks who have deals set up, who have options and blah, blah, blah. And they're, they have all things and they're just waiting for a green light from the studio or whatever. It's like, yeah, but are you doing something like that's like, and I don't mean it to denigrate, but I say it's like, that's a difference because it's like, I don't want, that's not my form of productivity to set up deals, to have all these things, in the works. I want to be doing stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of like, I don't know, difference entrepreneurial spirit or whatever, like you might want to put to it. It's like versus, waiting for the next gig, it's just kind of like this whole mentality that you have to do it. There's a lot of like burdens and cost to it, of course, to being your own entrepreneur and having your own ideas. And because it hasn't been done before, that's by nature of it, that it hasn't been done before. So you have to get massive buy-in, or at least people starting to believe in you to be able to do it, because you can't do it by yourself.
So how now, given everything that's going on with strikes and recession and everything like that, what is the landscape?
All good. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Answer my question. I mean, what's your, I'm not asking for your outlook. I'm asking for how you move forward and how you keep on creating and what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, nothing about the strike affects what I'm doing in the sense of creating work. Yes, it hinders job opportunities. It like slows down. You're not able to have the meetings with the right certain amount of people for all those reasons. Yes, all those things. But in terms of like me being aware, thinking about ideas, thinking about putting ideas to paper, writing it down, figuring it out, like that's all the process as a writer, as a creator, that is my own, right? So that's kind of like the, how do you kind of keep your sanity amidst all this? Because it is, I think we are in a, what do you call it? Like a paradigm shift. I think we're due for one, and it's going to have to figure out something. And there's going to be a lot of like broken hearts along the way. Let's not like, it's going to be a hard thing to get through, but we will get through it. But it's just going to be shift the entertainment paradigm in a huge way, and the way we kind of think about things. So that's all happening, but that doesn't affect me as far as what I'm trying to do and put down the paper or put down,
Yeah. What do you think? How do you think people are going to need to start thinking with all of this going
on? That's a big question.
Particularly with action cinema.
Oh, action cinema. Oh, that scales it down.
Yeah, we'll keep it on topic.
Okay. Well, I think it's the same thing. It's like what we do has to justify the audience's time and investment. Right. Nothing's a given. We're not asking you to support this because, I'm a certain identity or whatever. Like I don't really bank on that type of marketing, support this because it's Asian, support this because it's, action or whatever. Like it doesn't support it because it's good, right? Go see it. And if you like it, tell your friends about it. And I think we have to kind of switch that apathy channel a little bit more, because if you like something, talk about it, tell someone about it. Like that's really important to have that word of mouth. Whereas we kind of watch something and we kind of like, done, next, what's next? It's like we just like consume. We have that awful word, consuming content.
Ugh.
It's like, it's just getting,
it just grates on me. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I think we should shift our thinking around what that is. Because I think it just makes things ravenous and makes things like this bottomless pit where it's like, no, it's like you should be able to kind of like watch and enjoy the things you like. And if you like something, articulate it to someone else, and then that person, it could be their jam too, and they might like it, and so on. So just as far as like the action stuff that we do is like, justify the time for your audience and make it worth their time
Do
to
you,
tune in.
yeah, do you see that there could be an incentive for the audience to, not a financial incentive necessarily, but is there
Yeah.
some incentive there for the audience to like spread the word about what you're doing? Because I look, as a viewer myself, I find myself being apathetic a lot of the time, where I'll
Yeah.
watch things on YouTube and I'll go, "That was fantastic," and I just won't talk about it to anybody. Um, but I try and give, these. I always talk about the guys shooting watermelons in their backyards, like, not that they need
Yeah.
not that they need me to prop them up, but yeah, what do you think could be done on our side as producers, as creators, to like incentivize that communal input and communal kind of word of mouth?
I think it's fostering community. I mean, like you use the word right. It's like that's what film festivals were and still should be. It's meant to have people gathering together, talking about, engaging, and communicating with the actual filmmakers. Those are all kind of like nexus points that you can have versus like sitting on your couch and watching something on your queue list and then next. Like that's where it's missing. And whether you could be a virtual community, I think we saw some of that over COVID. There were virtual like watch parties and stuff like that. I don't know what it might look like, but I know it needs to have people need to have uh to watch the movie and then have coffee afterwards, right? That's
Yeah.
just the way always kind of engage stuff. We need to be able to talk about what we just saw. We don't just move on to the next thing. So that's a valve that needs to happen.
My heart agrees with you, Bao. It really does. My heart is all in this,
And here we're talking about
and
it.
here we're talking about it
We're
over
community
Zoom
here.
with
Yeah.
people just spread out across the world in the chat. Yeah. I mean, are we like? Have you seen this work, by the way, where you have movie and a coffee, whatever it is, in your experience?
Well, let me just talk about word of mouth. I know what's bubbling up word of mouth because I got my ear to the streets, Eric. But people are talking about like things, and it's like you can kind of pick up that their enthusiasm when they talk about it is because they actually like it, versus any type of like agenda or
Yeah.
any of that. So we pick up on that, right? And we want to see it because they like it and they seem really enthusiastic about it. So do I see that? Yeah, film festivals are kind of, at least for me, maybe it's an older institution, but it is a place for that. The
Hmm.
whole film festival, the whole thing about like the glitz and the sales and all that stuff, that's like, okay, I agree that some of that stuff could go away. But it is about like engaging at a movie theater and watching and see something together and be able to hang out afterwards and just talk about what you feel like. We still do that. I mean, I'll hang out with friends and we'll go watch a movie and we'll go and talk about it.
Yeah.
Is this an old fashioned thing? Maybe, but I mean, that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
And why not just keep continuing on that?
That was actually one of my favorite parts about showing movies and going to film festivals, was just talking to the audience afterward.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them sometimes didn't think that that was possible. Like a lot of
Mm.
people attending, especially with action films, where they see, an action movie, and then the guy that made the action is right there and is like, "Yeah, what do you guys think about that? Did you enjoy it? What do you guys watch?" And they're just like, it was good. Okay." And
Yeah. You get to bring it down their neck. You're kind of like,
yeah,
oh, what do you think? Yeah, you get to put them in that awkward place.
yeah, very awkward, very awkward. But no, I agree with you that film festivals are a great place, at least back when we were doing them.
It's also linear because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there was this other thing that I was mortified during COVID when they had these virtual film festivals, but they also had these live chat rooms going on while these films were screening, and that was just like I was just like
Yeah,
I complained to the festival. I was just being a squeaky wheel. But I was like, do we really need this? I know it's like we're trying to engage everyone, but like, can we just watch the movie and have people engage? But like, I could see the chat room, just people just mystery science theater, these movies, and it just hurts. Like watch these comments go through, and it's rough. And you're entitled to have your comments by all means, but it's just the whole engagement. Like just watch it
Well,
first,
then
and
what you
then
need to do next time you do this is you MST3K it during the show, and you make fun of
yes,
everything. You beat
you
them to the
yeah,
punch.
preempt it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then they're like, "Oh, great, yeah. Can we actually see the movie now?"
hate on my movie as much as I will. So I'll let me proceed.
I know all the bad comments. I'll give them to
Exactly.
you.
But ironically, we have a live chat right now, right? So there's a live
Yeah,
chat.
and
So
we have a
after all
question.
that talk,
Yeah, we have a question. Uh, saying, would you revisit Bookie as a full-length feature at some point in the future?
oh great, was that Ken Kidwa? Was he just
Unless no, this is
anonymous fan?
Nika
Hey Cube.
Video. Nika Video is always
Oh,
active in
right
these chats.
on. It's a fun world. Yeah, I mean, it's there was there's an interesting world that I was interested in, like even when I was starting out writing that short. It's just that whole I guess you could say pre-civil rights era, or like just it's just a weird bubble because you have this post Japanese internment and then pre civil rights kind of era stuff, and just kind of that weird 12, what do you say, maybe 15-year span that, of what race relations
Yeah.
were. And I just find it really interesting because there was also this crucible where all the music came out
And
of.
the best music, some of the best music of all time,
Exactly.
came out
So
of
it's
that
like
jam.
it just,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like it just kind of like it's an interesting period that I
Yeah.
feel like we don't really talk about as much.
Yeah.
But yes, I would love to revisit. Maybe not at Bookie, but I'd love to revisit that time period. Very much so.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Um, the the scene also in Japan with jazz after World War II as well.
Yes.
Japanese jazz just blew up, and it's like
Yeah.
some of the greatest jazz you'll ever hear. So
Oh yeah.
once you give Japanese culture something, like once they take it, it's like okay, you've just now handed off your cultural commodity, and now they're going to perfect it. Congratulations, you're now out of the market.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole thing like the denim, right? Japanese denim is like this huge restorationist movement, but they went and denim was huge after the war because of the GIs, and then they went after the looms of these jeans were out of the factory. The factories went out of business in the U.S. Like these Japanese manufacturers went to America to get these looms to bring back to Japan so that they could actually still stitch
Really?
denim on the original, So I mean, that's how intense that
Wow.
was.
Yeah, that's a trip, huh? Um, the
Random,
say again? Sorry.
random facts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those periods though are just sort of, you like the question would be if you did something during that period, right? In a sense, we've sort of like in a sense we've seen it all, where we've seen the victimization. We know the internment camps. We know people born in internment camps. We know these people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We've heard about it and we've seen the repercussions of it. But what I think is refreshing about something like Bookie, just to promote it because it's so cool, is that you're just sort of showing what normal people do under that situation.
yeah, yeah. And maybe that's kind of the way that you see the world. Like, yeah, your things aren't that great and they could always be better, but you could say, this whole hashtag of black joy, or there's joy in whatever situation that we can find.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of gets lost because there's also this I don't know if it's genre, but like this whole kind of like take where like everything has to be dreary, anything about race has to be dreary and just really like depressing and sad, and like, and certainly there are sad elements, but like it doesn't have to be the defining element
Yeah.
of all this thing. So I think there's a lot of room for stories, and I think we're going to see this maybe in the next few years as more storytellers of color are
Yeah.
coming of age or coming of experience, or being able to have the studio deals they're coming their way. They'll be able to have a lot more stories that show that side, because I think a lot of that elements of this dreariness kind of plays on white guilt. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
like buy the tickets, white people go see 12 Years a Slave or something, like, there's kind of like that type of that element where you have to kind of play up that, whereas like, well, what about stories that our own people love and enjoy for
Yeah.
ourselves?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
so
You bring up an interesting point because if you were to actually transport yourself to that period, most of the time, I would assume people are not dreary. People, if they're making music at jazz clubs, they're pretty stoked and they're having a good time. And not that bad things aren't happening,
yeah,
but if the emphasis is on the joy, and just like the general arc of just like what's the problem, how do you overcome it, and can you overcome it, and you do, right, as an action film, for example.
Yeah.
Then you're not focusing on the dreariness. You're focusing on a character that's not letting the dreariness bring them down, and that can be
Yeah.
like really powerful.
Yeah.
Like somebody who kind of stands out from that and says, like obviously you have an entrepreneurial spirit. Um, maybe that's one of your favorite kind of subjects, right? Of a character.
It's a fine line, and I mean, JoJo Rabbit for me was one of my favorite films of the last couple of years. But I know it's a bit of a lightning rod. There's some people that react very strongly to it. But I feel like it's celebrated, but also shed light on the tragedy of things in a way that was just really deftly done. Like it was so artful and it's beautiful and it's touching, but I don't think it sugarcoated
Right.
any of the terribleness of it all. But there was a certain satire, there's a certain kind of like poking fun of it,
Yeah.
poking fun at satire, satirizing it, that made it really, I don't want to say fun to watch, but it was like really engaging to watch.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a fine line, because when you do something like that, it's like you're gonna have people who just don't buy into it. Like it's just not gonna work. So it's like there's that fine line of like you say, kind of how do we portray this joy in these really terrible circumstances? But you're gonna lose people.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have another one. So that's the risk
Yeah.
of what it is to create something independently. Because I know Taika had been trying to make that for many years. So if you try to do the studio option, they're not going to greenlight something like that. They're not, they're going to find ways to shave it off and to make it a lot more palatable and stuff like that till it's not the thing anymore.
Yeah. So have you been watching anything of note recently?
What did I say in an interview? I'm just trying to, I don't remember. I've been catching up on a lot of stuff. Like I said, Love, Death, and Robots. I feel like I'm like 2 or 3 cycles behind everyone. Because again, I think I work by word of mouth.
Yeah.
So I don't like watching on the cusp of when it's released. So I just kind of wait for people to talk it through. And if people are still talking it 2, 3 cycles down, like, okay, maybe
Right.
it's worth checking out and stuff like that. But TV series, I was watching Reservation Dogs. I just finished out the second season of that, which I think is fantastic. And again, this is kind of relates to what we're talking about, about native life on a reservation. Of course, a lot of dark and dreary stuff, and but the show is really joyful. The show is really joyful and exuberant and funny, satirical. Also, doesn't shy away from the dark stuff either, by no means. Like that, it touches on some really heavy stuff. But again, that's the kind of the darkness and lightness that I really like for me personally, and so that was like my show for sure.
Felt like Revenant took almost like a similar angle, but it's like they flipped it, right? Where you have you have a very harsh environment. You're acknowledging that this is extremely harsh out here. You're not sugarcoating it. You're showing both sides, but you're
Yeah.
not sugarcoating the bad. So you're not shying away from what else was bad, right? Because there was a lot of
Yeah.
bad in general. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's this other one, Bone Tomahawk. I don't know if you've seen this, where yeah, you've got this like crazy kind of native tribe. It's just one tribe, acknowledging that yes, there were some murderous, like brutal tribes, and then of course you pay it. You give the voice from the other side that says like those aren't my people, man. like most of us are cool. They're weird, right? Um, that's the dark stuff that I like.
Yeah.
I don't know what you thought about Bone Tomahawk, but it's
I haven't seen it, but I've heard maybe I need to catch on to that.
brace
I saw
yourself.
Mission Impossible last week.
What'd you think?
Um, it was all right. I like Maverick. I thought Maverick was a lot stronger film. Um, I think there was more character stuff in Maverick that was a lot more engaging.
Uh,
Uh,
Mission Impossible, Maverick, or Top
no,
Gun Maverick?
Maverick.
Gotcha.
Tom Cruise's Maverick. Yeah. Just to compare it from last year.
Right,
I
I
thought that was
understood.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It was fine.
What do
A
you
lot, a
think?
lot of stunts, a lot of stunts going on. Oh, but also like you appreciate Tom Cruise. He's definitely a student of film. So every action gag that he has, it's just like really like it's very well studied. So this whole gag at the finale at the end is just it's smart, it's clever, but I just feel like I wanted a little more character stuff going on.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that
Like
was
Ghost
the.
Protocol. Ghost Protocol is probably my favorite from an action point of view,
Hmm.
uh, of the Mission Impossible stuff. Brad Bird, an animator turned director. Animator turned live action director. I just think he brought like something really fun to watch, from the action scenes and design and framing and editing. That was a fun watch for me.
Hmm. What do you think of Tom Cruise? What do you think of his arc
Tom Cruise
going
can do no wrong. What is arc like from when?
from, well, like when he was 30, he wasn't doing his own stunts. He's 60 and he's
That's
doing his own stunts
true.
now. It's kind of like the opposite of Jackie Chan.
Yeah, yeah.
Like where, like I wish
Respect.
30 years ago he was doing this too.
Yeah.
He kind of
No,
did, like kind of,
yeah.
but not the same.
All the respect in the world for him. Like I think just from what I know about his work ethic and his attitude, like it's super impressive. And then obviously what he brings to his commitment to movies and theaters and just like having that experience, like that's commendable. I think like you're right. He's kind of taking that torch really of just that action torch and doing a lot of things practically, enhancing with CG, of course, but also getting like all the best teams and the people around him to make him and also his team look good. I think it's super impressive. It's almost like you can almost give I don't know, a latter half career award for action. It's almost like it has his second half of his career also almost deserves its own spotlight,
Yeah.
you know. I think he's a good actor, obviously, and then I think to me, I feel like I kind of miss him doing a lot of other stuff, any of the more dramatic or even comedy stuff, because he was doing that and before as well. So it's like I just feel like it kind of takes him off the table because he spends like years doing
Yeah.
these Mission Impossibles, and
Yeah.
so there's not much time for any other projects. So that's kind of like there's not enough Tom Cruise to go around. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, super impressive.
Yeah. Just
What is he now? Is he like 60 something?
I
What
think
is
he's
he
60,
at?
right?
Yeah, I mean, it's super impressive.
When I'm always talking to stunt coordinators and directors and just asking like where is the young Tom Cruise at in Hollywood? Like is Hollywood not willing to invest in this?
Well, let's take that further. Like, if you're saying Tom Cruise had a latter half career renaissance and engaging action, even though he had never done really action before that, maybe they are out there, but they need to kick it into that gear to unlock. And so that's one thing. I think the other thing is like I don't know if studios would ever allow that in this day and age anymore. I think Tom Cruise has such clout that he's can insist on doing the stunts, but for an actor to forge his career and say, I'm going to do it this way, it's going to be really, it's just a hard sell from a business point of view. Um, I like Chris Hemsworth. I think he's got like all the kind of he's great acting. I think he has the physical elements. He could kick it into the second gear.
Right.
But I think it's just kind of like what that all means, because it also means like really being engaged in producing side. I think
Mm.
you have to learn how to produce to mold yourself to be an action star. Like no one's gonna make it for you. Does that make sense? Like I think that's the reason why Tom produces these films,
Yeah.
because he can cultivate his image that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
actors go from gig to gig, so I don't know. So it's like
Yeah.
you have to have that willpower, and because it's not, I don't know if the returns are as rewarding as if you were just kind of be your standard leading man, right? I think that's you have to have a certain insanity switch in your head, to be able to
Yeah,
do that. I was just
maybe, or you just, or your passion is in something that's a little bit more specific than being famous. Um,
Yeah, you have to have, someone a little bit human and maybe a little bit crossed wires, to be honest. Like Tom Cruise might have a couple of wires crossed, just like Jackie. And
maybe
like,
I'm not sure. I've never.
well, I was just watching like The Getaway with Steve McQueen. It's like you tell like
Yeah.
he got this daredevil like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
attitude, like you can see it lurking under. Like he just has
Yeah.
this like I'm gonna do this, right? So I just don't know, uh, who out there has that, but that's just a switch. That's a primal switch that
Hmm.
you either have or you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, and when you have an actor who seems to have it all, who's doing great,
Yeah,
well, then why would they start doing their own stunts?
100%, 100%.
Why would I
Especially
even?
with all the technology that's going on now.
Yeah.
And what are the, you know, again, what is the game? Because if I put in all this work and the double does my work and I still get the credit in the same way, then what's, you know, why do I, how to do that?
Yeah. And you live longer.
There's all those things.
You
There's
know?
all, it's the, you know what? It's the Iron Fist conundrum.
How so?
Well, it's like, the well-known story of casts, like some casts were putting in the work and some casts weren't.
Yeah.
And you could see it and it affected the quality of the show. But in the end, it's like they still made the same amount of money
Yeah. And they're still
from the
working.
other contract. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, and Jessica Henwick's is amazing. I think if we were talking about anything, I think we'd be looking at the female action star. I think the females, that kind of world is going to be really interesting in the next couple of years because I think that they're the ones who might have more to prove and have to kind of like want that primal switch is what I'm looking for, right? And so maybe that's where we should be looking at.
Yeah. Talk about that because I know a few female stunt performers who have that switch,
Yeah.
but I know, I don't know, like, are there actresses that have this, right? Like, or are you, this is all speculation, but,
All speculation.
um,
Yeah. Well, it's just a quality, right? I mean, it's just a quality of how you kind of go about your business and whether you want to take control and say, I want to do this stunt or I want to have this in my career and aim for it. Because you could have two worlds. You can see where a stunt woman turns into an actress, transitions into that, and like that could be a world, or an actress like a Jessica Henwick who might have one martial arts project and then like suddenly dives into like a Michelle Yeoh, right? She did one action project and then it was all lights out from there. Like it's just like you go, how do you? It could start anywhere. Anyone could. There's no one way to start out, but I think it's also that when that switch is turned on, it's like that's something that's happening. I
but
don't know.
do you think that this can come from America at this point?
Oh, good question.
Because you see it in Hong Kong in droves in the 80s, and there was this
Yeah, because there was a whole
spark.
machine around it. There's a whole machine that like supported it as a genre,
Yeah, I
and
mean
I think we
Corey
see that
Yoon,
now.
Corey Yoon bringing Cynthia
Yeah,
Rothrock in, for example, and like
yeah,
making her an action star and fostering her and pushing her,
yeah.
you know?
All the things, all of the above. Absolutely. I think that's kind of like, but I think it's a little more demanding now where people want the total package. So it's not just the action stuff. You have to be able to have charisma, screen presence, acting ability, all the things. So the other side of the coin is the scripts for females is not as strong. Like it's just industry wide. It hasn't been maybe that's work that you and I have to put in. But it's like that's what I'm saying. It's like if you don't have good material to make you look good, that in a way that's going to make a Tom Cruise look good, it's like
Yeah.
it's not gonna succeed, right?
Yeah.
So all those things have to kind of happen. All those things have to fall into place in the creation of an action star, be it male or female, right?
What do you think is going on there with scripts for female action leads?
I think just mostly honestly white guys that don't know how to write for women. It's just we're in this logjam where the industry, if we're talking about the A-list type of screen scripts and script writing, like it's generally still white men. So it's like this type of scripts that they're writing is for your leading white male character. So if you're asking them to write something for a female action lead and they just maybe switch the character name, but they write like it sounds like a guy, right? And so they're all like very manly women
Yeah.
characters, and so it's like is that what we're going for? It's
But
like
like,
that's
why does that even get through anywhere? Because everybody knows that's garbage. So how does it even get through to production? Because there's a lot of people that then say, yeah, great, let's bring it in. And given everything that we know about the industry, like you would think then that somebody's gonna say, like, hold on, like you just have this alcoholic drunk woman running around rampaging and she doesn't overcome her alcoholism. Like, I don't understand. You just wrote a Marlboro man as your lead and put a
yeah,
wig on him and said it's a woman, right?
yeah,
How does that
yeah.
get through? Like, why do they even let that pass? Is that the best they can do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the best they can do, but it's they're willing to go to print, they're willing to go out with it, right? So it's not stopping anything. So I think it's also like business wise, Eric, you know this just as well as I do. Scheduling, availability, budget, all the things. So if you have a talent that's available for, March to August, and you have a script that's kind of good or kind of not kind of good, but it's ready, it's you could read it, and then you have a location that's like all those things have, and then you go before it really should be done. I agree with all the things, but the way the business is done is that's how it is. So it's like, again, I don't look towards studios or big major, the higher ups, if you will, to make those major seismic shifts. It's like it's the work that we're doing that create these shifts, and then the studios kind of bank on and capitalize on it.
I mean, do you think
Like
that?
that's like just like with any trend, right? So
Yeah. I mean, do you think that there is, like, aside from, the race of the writers involved, do you think that there's also kind of a machinery involved where the idea is equation of men and women, and that there might be a propensity, like, even if you're not a white male, to look at that script and say, yeah, that's exactly where, like, we should be able to just swap a woman in there. We should be able to just do that. And we're going to find a female who can carry that. And it ends up being very awkward every time.
yeah. Well, there's that term, the male gaze, in cinema, and just how the perspective and viewpoint of
Yeah,
a
I'm very
male's
sensitive to that.
very sensitive. Okay, prepare to be triggered because this is welcome to my country. No, it's like, but it's the exact.
I used to
There's
get a lot
also
of male gaze on my Tekken in real life videos. And anyone listening who did that crap, I hate you.
there you go, there you go. But there's also a male gaze from the executive point of view or from a marketing point of view. Like it's like, what type of female action hero are we looking at? Like a Lara Croft, or like is it all that kind of like the image that we're looking for is what a female action hero, and same with the male action hero. You want the chiseled pecs and just the buff bod and all those things. So it's those are all kind of like tropes that kind of go into it.
Yeah.
And so that also defines the type of writing. If you say that's the end goal you want for your action hero, that also affects the type of writing.
Yeah.
Because writing, to me, when you say someone's muscled and chiseled and stuff like that, there's not a lot of vulnerability going on. There can be, but the default is like, this guy's the best. He's the top Navy SEAL, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Now you switch to the female. She's the top assassin, number one, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's like everything is so superlative that, it's just all the things that go into a soup of writing script. Like all that happens because they're going for a result.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's
because it's easy to say, oh, it's taken with a female. When you do a pitch, right? It's easy to say, oh, we're going to do Taken with a female, or we're going to do Extraction with a female. It's just like, being like the executives, like it flash, all the flash bulbs go off in there.
But everybody seems to like that idea. Like, it's not just the executives. You throw that out to a random crowd at Disneyland, and everybody would go nuts.
It's all the things. No, and that's all the marketing. So yeah, I'm not saying these don't work. Obviously, they're working, but whether they have depth or not, you have to put in the work to actually make the script the best that can be. But if you're trying to chase, imitating something that's already out there, then I think those are conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
And they sell exactly because they are Xeroxes or they're imitations of something else. There's a reason why they sell. And I'm not arguing that point, but I'm saying, like, there's a reason why this also is copycat and the surfacey, because you're trying to do it exactly the way something else is there.
So are you seeing, any good, I guess, progress on this front in other countries, like with films like Furies and Vietnam and all this? I don't know if you've watched that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the work has to come. It's not from I don't think it's going to come from the major studios.
It never does, Bao. Like, action films. No, I mean, look, like Ong Bak, the Korean cinema, the Raid. You're talking about these small markets relative to America, taking a gamble. Well, it's not even a gamble for them. Like, they just do it. They do something that the studios would never do.
Well, look at the Bollywood filmmakers. It's just pulling back, like Triple R or whatever. A lot of these great people can do action. but they're not getting hired. They're not making any Hollywood studio pictures. And so I think let's unpack that, because I think one, I don't think a measure of success is to get a Hollywood
I
studio
totally
deal.
agree with
That's
you.
not
I totally agree.
right. So, but I think in a lot of people's minds, if you haven't made it as a filmmaker, or you haven't made it as an actor, if you don't cross over to that stratosphere, right? But
Yeah,
they're not interested. They're not interested in doing it. They want to make these films for their communities and their countries and their regions and their languages. That still makes money.
yeah,
So they're content with that. But going back to what you're saying, it's like whether there's going to be other works. Like I think everything everywhere all at once is an action movie. It has an action heroine. It's a different story. It's a different take. It's an indie take. But those are kind of examples. Like it can be done. It just has to be. You have to give the creators the ability to do it.
you mentioned this idea that even if like if you have the next Tony Jaa come out of Malaysia or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And this is what you get with Eco and Joe Taslim and
Yeah.
whoever it might be, right? And the idea is that, yeah, like you said, you go to Hollywood, you've made it. And yet, I don't know, I'm sorry, not many people talk about the Sub-Zero fight in Mortal Kombat, right? Like, not many people talk about it. People still talk about the raid. And
Yeah.
you, is it, you would think that them being far enough away that they would be, I guess, is there not enough money where they're at, and that the only real economic way out is to go to Hollywood? Is it a deal they can't refuse? Because
He's really good.
every
I'm sure.
time I see
don't know.
Tony
I don't know
Jaa in
the
a
context.
Hollywood movie, I'm just like, oh no, like why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Go back to Thailand.
But then see,
But I can't say that, right? That's not
oh,
fair. Go back to
you're gonna tell
Thailand.
him go back
I
to
mean it
Thailand.
in
Okay,
a
all right,
very
all right.
loving way. Get out of my country and go do good
Go back to
films.
All right, there you go.
There
It
it
all
is.
comes out on this
Yeah,
live
it's a
stream.
xenophobic non-xenophobia.
Well, I mean, you could almost say this, to Jackie or Jet. Maybe they're a lot older now, so that's a different conversation. But you say if you can make quadruple times the money for less effort,
Yeah.
or go back to your country, like you're just telling someone,
Yeah.
go back to your country, and then slug it out, just like tough it out and make it the way movies are done over there, and just take a toll on your body
You know,
for less. It's like it's a math problem.
you just brought up a perfect example of when it worked. Like when Jackie came and did Rush Hour. Rush Hour was good. Rush Hour 2, I thought like that was Jackie's action. Like that is Jackie action.
Yeah.
Sammo comes and does martial law. That is Sammo action, right?
Yeah.
And The Matrix, come on, like you never get fight scenes like that in Hollywood. And you have an example there where you have these Hong Kong guys coming over and killing it. Didn't last forever, but why is it a language barrier? Like, why can't that experiment be replicated?
I don't know the answer. Let me buy myself some time to answer that question. But because also I think the stuff that they went back to do, because they were doing this like kind of like commuting thing. They were doing this like one in the US, one in Hong Kong, one in the US, one right.
Donnie Yen also.
Right. I think a lot of stuff that they were doing in Hong Kong was, you could say it was kind of maybe the downward slope of Hong Kong cinema as a whole, but like there was a lot of clever stuff in Accidental Spy, like the stuff in the Jackie was doing with the when he was the naked fight or whatever, the fight that he was doing with all the dishes and stuff like that, and also like the glue tape factory fight, like it's clever. And I could tell he was probably so frustrated in the American system that he brought all of his ideas and his frustrated energy, and it's like let's do it the way. And then like there was some really cool stuff that were being done throughout. So, and he made his ducats, so he made a lot of money right through that whole process, and was able to do the things that he wanted to do. So maybe that was the perfect business situation to have. To your question, can we go back to that? Is that what you were saying, or like can we?
Is it possible to replicate that with another?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to make it worth their time, because I think now the economy and global economy, and this is maybe also touches on what we're talking about with the strike and stuff like that. It's not American centered anymore. You can have a really great life and have a sustainable movie career in Bollywood, in Vietnam, in China, in Hong Kong. Like if you just star there, yeah. If you want to cross up, it's like the whole issue with a lot of actors who were coming across, like what was the Korean actor? Shoot, forgot.
Byung
Life.
Lee Byung Hyun.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he had issues because he came over here and they treated him like crap,
Oh.
right? And he was like, why am I dealing with this?
Mm.
And then he went back. It's like that's the very common thing because you kind of realize America's not all it's cracked up to be. It's like I have a great life, in Korea. I have a great life in India. I can make the movies I want and blah blah blah, and it's just not worth the trouble.
Right.
But if you're trying to get the whole nut, if you're trying to be a global superstar, then that's if that's your goal, then yeah, you would probably have to set your sights on Hollywood, um, and try to make it there. So I think that's kind of like, do we want that, or even are they incentivized to do that?
Yeah.
But I think we're in an interesting spot now because I think with Squid Game or like all these other stuff that's native original content that's being streamed or distributed. Now we're interesting. Like I think what you're saying is how do we K-popify everything? Because I mean, if you talk about a cultural force and like have that as a means of distribution, like that's really what like we as Americans have to watch their movies on their terms and not have to try to co-opt them
Yeah.
to be in the Hollywood system, right? So I think that's probably the next paradigm shift on that.
Hmm. Yeah, I do think that, ever since, especially since, 1999, you have South Korea kind of being its own mecca of cinema,
Yeah,
and the entire Asian world knows Korean dramas now. All of Hollywood knows Korean action. We all know it.
yeah,
Well, and we can't replicate it. It's like not possible to replicate that.
yeah.
It's going to be Hollywood. It's going to be like Marvel style action, or it's going to be Korean action over there.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
you also think about like what is the U.S. national product? Like what movies are actually being put out by the U.S. And it is franchise, Marvel, MCU. There's no original work in that sense. And I'm not denigrating it in any way, but I'm just saying like if we were talking about original work that's being put out by other countries versus the same product
yeah.
year after year, even though you have different characters, different storyline, it's still the same thing. Like that's where people are gonna be hungry for other things.
Yeah. Look, like you could say it's a franchise now, but John Wick is a very original property.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
a lot of the stunt guys are doing now is very
that's
original
the
stuff,
exception.
you
Yeah,
know.
I would say that's the exception for sure. Yeah, but
And
it's become franchisified.
right,
Which
yeah,
is all power to them.
yeah.
All power to them. So, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's the way this business in the U.S. at least works.
Is that not how it works other places when things get really popular and blow up?
I mean, yeah, I mean you do sequels, of course, but I guess the default question, when you're developing anything here, it feels like it's like what IP do you like of ours? Or like, that's the meeting. Like, what in our let me send you a library of our IP and you tell us if you think you can do anything with it. That's generally what a meeting like I would take here in the States
Right.
versus elsewhere. It's like, well, what do you want to do?
Hmm. Hmm.
So those questions are going to be set apart from each other.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're not doing that.
Am
It,
I?
well, not yet. I mean,
Not yet.
I'm sure you have a sequel written, but we won't hold that
Yeah, yeah.
against you.
All franchise, all the way.
Franchise with toys and TV show and everything, spin-offs. But
Which
the
is not a bad thing. I think we just have to clarify. It's not a bad thing. But if it's the only thing, then it's like we have to think hard about ourselves, what we're doing in an industry.
yeah, and also just as an audience, like what are we expecting from our cinema, right? Are we open to new things? I don't know. I don't know if we're really open to new stuff anymore in this country because I see people do the exact same thing over and over and over, and it gets the same applause. It feels ritualistic.
I
And
like the mandatory standing ovation. Like it's just
yeah,
all
yeah, yeah, yeah.
hello,
It's
this
very,
movie.
yeah, like really three, but you know, and then that can obviously crack, but maybe in the days of cinema, well, in the days of going to the theaters, um, there was possibly more of a chance to challenge the audience because they were stuck there.
Yeah. And I think it's still there. I think audiences are a lot more savvy in a different way than they were before. Like
Yeah,
now kids or young folks are watching movies in the original language
yeah,
and the subtitles
yeah,
that's preferred.
yeah.
You know how like when you and me, like everyone wanted if it wasn't dubbed in English, like I'm not gonna engage in this movie from that's not American, right?
Yeah, I
Like
remember that.
that's a generational shift, and that's a great thing because I think now we're like I said, we're learning to watch these movies on the creators' terms and not trying to make them cater to us. And I think that's a shift, and I celebrate that. I think that's a great thing.
I wish other countries would do that and let Paper Tigers be in its original language.
Oh yeah,
That's why
exactly.
America's so great, is because we actually watch things in their original language.
There you go. There you go.
Uh,
Uh, yeah. I mean, but I think that's yeah. I'm hopeful. I think there's a lot of really interesting things. I think we just need to be able to, as creators, be able to give what people are not necessarily saying they want, but also what give them a taste that they never knew they needed. Right? That's the art and the goal of
yes,
what we do.
and yes, that's a very pointed observation because how do you do that when people expect the same sort of feed? They expect content,
Hmm.
and how do you challenge them? Because I mean, I think people hate being challenged until it's done and then they liked it. It's
Yeah.
like when I take my kids to the snow, right?
Yeah.
And they love the idea of going to the snow. We get
Yeah.
there, and then they sink into it 3 feet, and they freeze up, right? Literally,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we're in the snow for 2 minutes. And it took
Yeah.
us an hour and a half to get there. We're in the snow for 2 minutes. I pick them up, put them back in the van, and they're freezing, they're crying, they hated it, and then the entire ride home, that's all they can talk about, and it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to them. That's all they talk about for the next two
Yeah.
days, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is it about us then where we hate it and then we love it? It's so transformative, but we hate transforming.
That's a good term. Well, but we're also in the business. It's the entertainment. We're in the business of entertainment, so it shouldn't feel painful
Right.
when they watch stuff.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, it's yeah.
we're not. It's not film class. We're not forcing them to watch like
Well, it feels like it sometimes, honestly, Bal. There's some of these movies that come out and they're really jamming something down your throat, and some people take it, I don't know, out of obligation or something, but
Yeah. Yeah. There's that too. So I think that's kind of the balance of what we're trying. I think for any work, not only to be successful, but to endure.
yeah,
I think that's an important distinction.
yeah,
It's not the one and done. Thank you, ma'am, and we're on to the next. Like I want to create stuff that endures, because it means like it also means a lot of things because it can appeal to a universal audience.
mm,
Doesn't matter space and time, whatever. Like that's the work that I'm trying to aim to do. That's because that's the most we can engage on that level. But yeah, but it is entertainment, and we want to be able to give something that doesn't feel like it's work.
right.
A spoonful of honey makes the medicine go down, and all those things.
Sugar,
It could be all
spoonful
the
of
things.
sugar.
It can be all those things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I say painful and transformative, I mean accepting a new star, for example, a new actor who looks different
Yeah,
than you're used to, or a new kind of camera style where it's off-putting, but in the end, it's like,
yeah,
dang, I got to go back to that and look at it again.
great, agreed. Um, yeah, but I think for a star or like that's this is what I think charisma is. Like you just kind of like instinctually sit up and pay attention to an actor that has that it factor, right? Whether it's a small part, no, like that's to me is what stardom is, not the whole machinery of like creating the image or blah blah blah, but like they have that screen presence, even in a small role or whatever, like that. So even when for an audience to take to a new star, it shouldn't be that much work for the audience. It's a whole lot of work for us to find and cultivate and like capture that lightning in a bottle. But for the
Yeah.
audience to fall in love with a star, I
Mm,
don't think. I think
mm.
that's a very that's the beauty of movies. Like people will will take to someone very quickly.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. But if marketing disagrees, then
Oh
no.
yeah, and there's all the things.
Yeah,
Oh, I mean, when those stories are voluminous, right? It's
yeah,
just like how an actor has just been muddied down. Like that's why I like Paul Rudd. Like Paul Rudd has an interesting career because like he always had it, but he was never given the right roles or the marketing. But And now everyone's like loves him, but because he's always been that guy though. He's never changed. Like he's been really that fun actor.
Hmm.
So
Um. Okay. Well, let's remain hopeful and keep our eyes out.
how do we end
And
on a better note, Eric? Let's go.
yeah, we gotta you know we gotta keep what do we we're trying we do want to challenge
Yeah, of course.
the business. We do want to challenge it. We're stuck in this position where if you challenge it too hard, you're not going to get any meetings. And so what you talked
Well, I
about,
think we have the challenge also because we have a we need to because the audience is getting smarter and smarter and they're getting savvier and pickier about what they like. Again, you're asking for their time and attention. And so if they've seen the same thing over and over and then you have a dish that's serving up the same thing, like they sniff that
yeah,
really quickly.
yeah,
So it's not just we want to do it as creatives to challenge ourselves, but we are compelled to because our audience is asking for more,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, they're hungry, and
Oh yeah.
uh, there's a lot of angst about cinema, and that's why when a Tom Cruise movie comes out, when a John Wick comes out, it's like somebody just opened up a new dam. Like everybody goes, it's the biggest thing in the world, and it's like a world fair, and so and
Well, I think that's I don't know what your opinion of Maverick was, but for me, like I think it hit all the cylinders
yeah,
because it was just like it had all the elements of star power and the story and blah blah blah, and it just had everything to justify for you to put down your money. People are sensitive to that. So if you're gonna ask them to put down 7, 14, $20 a pop
yeah,
plus sessions,
yeah,
the movie better be good. I don't think it needs to be a big like spectacle, like a special effects spectacle. It helps, but I don't think that's the major element. It's like people just want to see a solid movie
yeah,
and people will come out for that. I
yeah,
believe in that. It's the field of dreams
yeah,
principle, right? It's like you have to believe in that.
yeah,
But if you expect to throw money at a multi-million-dollar project and make it a sequel franchise and throw in new stars and all the stars and the stars you knew and loved and now the new stars and just try to like throw everything into the mixing bowl and expect people to flock to it, it doesn't work that way. You will have a flop because you haven't taken the time to cultivate the script, to cultivate the packaging, the actors, blah blah blah. Like it, that takes work.
yeah. Well, let's keep working. Let's do it, man.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
change the world.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's a lot of fun talking to you, man. And I appreciate all
Always.
your insights and your perspective on this. It's very refreshing. And oh, I wanted to ask if what's next for you?
Hmm. I don't know. Sitting on my duff. I'm working on stuff. I'm working out some ideas. I think it's like when the strike, if and when the strike lifts, I think everyone's going to be engines flaring. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff coming out. For me, I'm working on some stuff. I can still do stuff on my own, like I said, but it's just the right time to get it out there.
Okay.
But it's my pleasure talking to you, sir. You're the man.
I'm just doing a podcast now.
You're doing the thing.
Just doing a
Maybe with a
thing.
virtual set. Like I said, the virtual sets are interesting. Like that might be a new avenue to even explore as well.
Like a 3D background behind me.
Oh, I couldn't tell. I
So
didn't see the ripples. You're just all like,
yeah, that's all virtual. All that's fake. Yeah.
okay, there you
It is a virtual set.
go.
You think I have all this? You think I read these? Like this is all fake.
No,
No.
I mean, I bought it. I went with it because I believed you to be a good reader.
No, I
So,
can't read. I'm totally illiterate. Haven't read a thing.
okay, that tracks too. It all tracks.
All right, Bao. Hey, man. It's been a lot of fun, and keep me posted. And let's do this again sometime. It's a lot of fun talking to you.
Of course, yeah. Anytime, man. Respect, love, and respect what you're doing.
Likewise.
Shout out to everyone streaming in. Thanks for tuning in, and see you all on the other side.
Right on. Bye.
Bye.